Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of City on a Hill. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, so first and foremost, we had the whole Jackie situation. Jackie got shot. What's so interesting, immediately he's thinking like, oh, it's the Aguilo brothers, and it's like, well, why do you assume? I mean, he said he saw the person, but then other people are like, yeah, but you might have been like, it was dark, like, how can you be for sure? And he's assuming because it's like, right there, he's always, because there was that guy he was working with being like, oh, like he said a couple episodes back, like, aren't they going to come after you? Like, you'll be coming out after having eaten a steak or something, and then like they end up blasting you. So it's like, and because to me, I think the timing is interesting. Like, at any point in time, why pick now to come after you? Like, the fact is they would know that they knew that you were at Bet's place. I think that is a little suspicious. Like, they decided to hit you there. The argument could be like, right, they're trying to get you somewhere isolated. But also, like, you haven't been an FBI agent for a while. If they wanted to come after you for whatever beef they have with you, why not come after you sooner? Why pick now? Why pick in front of Bet's place? It seems a little too convenient. So the conversation then becomes like, well, could it have been Dryden? That's what immediately came to my mind thinking, but it's like, does Dryden know that Jackie is investigating him? And he talks about DeCourcy later, and he's like, well, Letitia knows that, like, I'm asking questions. Whether she's told Dryden or not is a whole other thing. So it could easily have been him. It wouldn't make sense considering he hit Bet's place, and especially that Bet wasn't there at the time. So is that just because Bet decided to disappear, or did Dryden make her disappear because she started questioning things? I mean, hell, for all we know, maybe Dryden approached her because he knew Jackie was investigating and either made her disappear or told her to disappear. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that front. But Jackie's in the hospital. I thought something was going to come up the moment it's like, oh, I can't find my phone. And I'm like, I wonder if that was on purpose. Like, the fact is that it's like, because Jenny just ended up getting him a new one. But part of me wonders, like, the fact is his phone disappearing, maybe that wasn't just like some accident of like, oh, I was at the hospital, we'll try and track it down. They never did. So Jenny just got a new one. Maybe there's something that should be said about that. Even the fact is Letitia paying you a visit later, there could be something with that too. So... But obviously Jenny, despite everything, she's like driving there. She's like, I was trying to remember the last thing I said to you, like this morning. He was like, I'm pretty sure it was something along the lines of go fuck yourself. And she's like, yeah, but like, she's like, the fact is that like we kind of give and take when it comes to like art. Like, it's just like such a back and forth thing for us. And for Jackie is like, as a smooth sailing doesn't make a good sailor. Like, it's like who you are as a sailor kind of really comes out when you're in those very tumultuous times. That's when who you are as a sailor really shines through. And he's like, I think love is kind of the same way. It's like, yeah, the bumpy roads and how you handle it, making your way past those moments is kind of what really defines relationship, not just the calm moments. I mean, you don't want your relationship all tumultuous and just like fiery and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, like being able to get those rough patches are a big fundamental part of kind of strengthening a relationship. So, and obviously Benny came. Also Jenny's mom, which was interesting. She's like, oh, I just came to see if that bastard died. Even saying like, oh, if he dies, I'm getting back in my fucking house. It's like, Jesus. And I love that because Benny also like kind of doesn't care for her grandmother, because it's like, Jesus, like, come on, like, dad's in the hot. That's my dad you're talking about. It's like, oh, look at her with these 3-cent words. And it's just like, oh, her mother come. And it's like, oh, I'd get you something too, but I'm hoping that you're not going to stay here long. And it's like, oh, I told you shouldn't have let her go to like a New York college, because she'll come back an uppity like witch or something like that. I'm like, God, your mother is such an asshole, Jenny. And she knows that. And it's like, right. She's like, oh, I heard what you did to your dad. It's like, oh, he had it coming. She's like, I've wanted to hit him so many times, but I never had the courage to do it. So kudos on you for doing it. But she ends up revealing, like, right, your dad isn't who you think. Like, you think you know the whole story, but you don't. Turns out that her mom is like the second marriage. And then it's like, oh, he was actually with someone else. But then the moment Jenny was like, no, it was like a younger person named Eve. It's like, oh. Then it's like, she's like, oh, I guess the third marriage didn't work out. Which you're like, oh. And it's like, wait, he's been married 3 times? It's like, yeah. So I guess, because she's like, yeah, like, it's just only history repeating itself. She's like, I stole your father from some woman stole your father from me. So, but it turns out Jenny has a half brother. And the fact is, her mom was like, you don't want to get involved with him. Must mean like, he must share a lot with their father. where it's like he probably kind of has a lot of their father's nasty traits, and maybe that's why. I mean, also Jenny's not going to follow her mother's advice because her mom's such an asshole that it's like, yeah, but this is a brother I had no idea about. Like, you know, I mean, who knows what her half brother's relationship is with their father? Like, maybe they're on good terms, maybe not. We'll have to wait because you know Jenny is going to, you know, because maybe this is kind of the closure she needs. Like, fuck anything with her dad, but maybe being able to, you know, be with her, like, get to know her half brother, which you're like, you get the feeling like, oh, there's no way that's going to go well. I mean, the whole trying to get close to your dad kind of blew up in your face, or at least trying to get closure from that kind of blew up in your face. So you kind of get the feeling like, probably going to find out that your half brother's a scumbag too. Like, your mother's an asshole, but she'll probably still, like, she's probably right about this. You know, assholes recognize assholes, end up kind of being like a very interesting through line this episode, which we'll get to later, but either way, Jenny's trying to make Jackie, you know, comfortable, and I love that Jenny has that she kind of reminds me of my dad in that regard of, like, Jenny's willing to talk to any and everyone about anything. Like, she's just very, like, hospitable like that. My dad's kind of like that. It's like you never think that I'm my father's son, considering, like, I'm the very, like, borderline antisocial person I am, but my dad will talk to anyone, and, like, Jenny's here bearing her soul, talking about, oh yeah, this is my daughter Benny, my husband Jackie, and she's like, oh, these cookies, like, yeah, I used to bake, but I'm too lazy to be in the kitchen anymore. It's like, yeah, it's like you're talking to a complete stranger and she's opening up, but it's like, oh, which I love. Jackie's like, hey, my wife is just trying to be nice to you. If it was me, I would have said go fuck yourself ages ago. But it's like his roommate's kind of an asshole, but she's even like, hey, be nice to Xavier, because it's like, right, he was at a gay club or something like that, and he was just having fun, and he got jumped and beat up, and Jenny's like, oh, that's so effed up, and she was talking about where she works. It's like, like Sue's daughter coming out to her, and it's like, oh, it helps people with AIDS, and he's like, he kind of like took it as like, oh, you're just trying to win brownie points. It's kind of how he took it. So he kind of has a very pessimistic view on the world, like, okay, you're just trying to win brownie points with me, lady. But it's just Jenny being Jenny. So he just kind of came off as an asshole. So him and Jackie kind of butt heads the entire episode. I even love later on, Jackie's like hearing something, waking up. He's like, wait, are you doing what I think you're doing? He's like, it's my side of the room. He's like, at the very least, have the fucking decency to go in the bathroom. And I love he like, we'll dissect all the stuff that he said to Jackie. But the fact is that he's saying all that about Jackie. He stopped masturbating long enough to say all that, and then immediately went back to it. And I'm like, how can you be in the urge to like rub it out? I guess like he kind of felt like he won the argument with Jackie, and it's like, yeah, I'm like rock hard from like winning the argument. I don't know. It's like, how do you immediately go back to it? And him masturbating after saying all that, there was a lot of truth to what he was saying that really bogged down on Jackie, because he knows exactly who Jackie is. He's like, oh, I've seen you on TV. You saw that bank heist and everything, kind of referencing like the I think he was referencing, not the armor card robbery, the whole season 1 situation. But it's like, yeah, Jack is like, yeah, that was me. He's like, yeah, you need to shave that mustache off. Which I'm like, I wonder, was that written specifically because, like, has anyone ever, I don't know, like, part of me wonders, like, such a very specific line of dialogue, it might just be him being like, oh, you look like such an idiot with the mustache, or it's just, you know, it almost feels like, because obviously the mustache kind of adds to like the sliminess that is Jackie Rohr. Like, I don't know what it is when you have just that mustache by itself, and it feels like it fits with how slimy Jackie is. So I don't know. It's like this interesting character trait for like some slimy people is like, whoa, like that type of mustache. You know, either way. I don't know if there was just kind of like a deeper like writing for that like particular line of dialogue, but he was kind of going in on Jackie about like, oh yeah, like I'm an asshole and you're an asshole. And that's why I was saying like assholes recognizing each other, because it's like Jackie was basically looking himself in the mirror, that it's like, I mean, and I think this speaks volumes about Xavier. Xavier didn't to what we saw in the episode, him and Jackie are it's like looking in a mirror, because neither one of them had anyone there for them. It's like, right. And he was getting on Jackie's case about like, oh, you're going to have no one. But it's like, I mean, who knows if no one really came to visit you from what we saw in the episode. But he plays into the fact is that like, hey, like you're going to wake up, be old, and have no one, no wife, no daughter, no friends. Because the only people that legitimately care about him that showed up were Jenny and Benny, and it's like any colleague, like no real colleague showed up. The only people that showed up were people investigating it. But even the guys almost like, it's a long list of people who want you dead, so I'm probably not going to really do that much for you. It's like, oh, you want protection? If you were still with the bureau, sure, but like considering like you're kind of a nobody now, we don't give a shit about you. But the other guy's trying to do his job, almost being like, sorry, so. It is the thing of like Jackie has no one. The closest thing he has to a friend legitimately is DeCourcy, and that's a very tumultuous relationship. It's like his relationship with the people that he cares about who semi-care about him. And because the only reason why DeCourcy was there was just to give him an update about the whole Dryden case, but also like Siobhan was like, oh, you should go. And she bring him some flowers too. And he was like, DeCourcy was like, because she was like, are you going to see Jackie? And he was like, no. Have you been to see Jackie? No. Are you going to go see Jackie? No. Maybe you should bring him. You should go see him. And he's like, all right, bring him some flowers. And he's like, no, I'm drawing the line there, But there is this very complicated friendship that is there. It's a weird, complicated situation, but it made Jack that in conjunction with probably just being on the anesthesia as he kind of lumps it into that he got very existential about it, because he even says that line to Benny. He's like, right, when an asshole says something to you, but you kind of ignore them because they're an asshole. But then you kind of have to take away the whole aspect of them being an asshole and kind of listen to what they say. And you're like, they might have been an asshole, but that doesn't mean they weren't speaking truth. And it kind of put things in perspective for him that he's taken a lot of stuff for granted, especially Jenny. I mean, she was worried about you. Letitia shows up and she's about to like rub you out, like rub you down, rub one out with you while you're in the hospital while Jenny's potentially there. And Jenny's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. It's like, oh, that just confirmed it. She already had her suspicions, but them together like that just made her go like, yeah, you're definitely banging. So that sends her on her path, which we'll get to in a second. But all of that made Jackie kind of regret, like, yeah, he took his everything and everyone for granted. It's like, right, he's been living his life as such of an asshole. Because that's been the conversation of like, Jackie claims that like, oh, I know who I am. It's like, you haven't really taken a look inside. Like, yeah, you're self-aware to some extent, but this episode, you really got existential. You finally took a look at the good and bad of what makes you who you are. And, because Jenny had said that in an argument, was it last episode or the episode was before last? She had thrown that to Jackie, and his counter was like, oh, I know who I am. It's like, this episode kind of shows that you really did. You really do now, because he was calling Benny. He's like, yeah, it's just saying that it kind of put things in perspective for him about how he's once again hasn't really been grateful for all the stuff that he has. And he's like, oh, I'm not going to bore you with the details, because Benny, we find out her and Faust broke up because she relapsed. She had some weed and some tequila shots and blacked out. And obviously she's like going to meetings again, but she's like, don't tell Dad, because I think she's scared that if her dad knows, it's like, oh, he's going to pull her out of college and he's going to like go in protective mode again. Because I think for her, it's like, she's probably scared of like, she knows how her mom reacted, but at least she feels like she can at least talk to her mom. If Jackie will probably lose his shit, and that she's scared of that. Because Jackie will always blame himself that what happened to Benny will be on him. The whole Clay Roach? That whole thing is like, yeah, that was on me, what happened to Benny. And like, he'll never forgive himself for that, So if anything happens, if Benny ever relapses again, he's still going to put that on him. Like, that I played some role in that, and I'm scared what might happen to you if you relapse, especially with, this whole Dryden thing. Like, of course, that's like, not sitting well with him either. So, but Benny just didn't want him to know, because I think she's just like, oh, he'll worry himself to death, and she doesn't want that. So, because at least her mom, I think she can be like, okay, like, mom's worried too, but I think Jackie's going to be on a whole other level. So, because yeah, he makes it seem like, oh, Jenny's a like overbearing mom, but he can be the extremely overbearing father at times. And the entire time he's trying to call Jenny, she's out with Father Doyle, which is sad. It's like, oh, the timing is like... But to be fair, it's like... And I said it last episode, I'm not going to judge Jenny. She has every right for her and Father Doyle to bang it out, considering like all the times Jackie's cheated on her, how she's been nothing but faithful for him. They've been good to him. All she did, like the fact that she went out of her way to get you your badge back from the bottom of the waters. It's like, come on. she's done nothing but support you and be there for you, and you couldn't even do the bare minimum, you know, so. And so, like, yeah, she has every right. It's just kind of sad, like, right, while you're having this existential moment, she's already out there, like, kissing Father Doyle. Because she has every right to be with someone who is going to treat her right. Treat her like treat her the way she deserves to be treated. To see her the way she deserves to be treated. You know? And I think, yeah, Jackie's going to continue down this path of this, epiphany, but I think it's going to be interesting to see, because I think by the time that happens, it's going to be after the fact, which even Sue was like, oh, the best revenge against Jackie is to fuck this priest, and it's like, yeah, like, have sex with him. And they decided to go have dinner, which I love. Father Doom, like, yeah, probably don't want to show up to your house, because it's like, that's probably going to be a little weird considering everything. It's like, I don't want to just, if anything happens between us, I don't want it to be in your home. That's going to be weird. Also, because it's like, right, your husband super doesn't like me and doesn't want me to be there, so last thing we need is that issue, so. And obviously, like, Father Doyle talks about, like, yeah, like, obviously growing up, he was, like, religiously, like, he had his very, very straightforward notions of what was, you know, sin and what was bad and stuff like that. He talked about going off to, like, college and, like, the temptations and stuff. And now it's like, right, he's seen more of the world when he went off to college. And now, like, those temptations have only kind of grown, obviously, being around Jenny. And he's like, it doesn't matter what I think about you. What do you think about yourself, Jenny? She's like, I think I'm someone who is worthy of love. He's like, you don't know, that's wrong. You are worthy. Don't think you're worthy. Know that you are. So they end up making out. Whether it goes beyond that, we'll have to wait and see. But and it's just kind of sad that the episode literally ends on Jackie, like, holding a phone in his hand, just being all alone in that room, not even having his asshole roommate Xavier, because he ended up transferring to a different room. Plus, even the orderly that's taking care of him, home dude, doesn't even like him, because it's like, right, you keep getting my name wrong. You're such an asshole. Like, literally no one can stand you. Other elements to the episode. Let's talk about the Siobhan situation. Siobhan ended up, well, first and foremost, at her job, like, her boss is kind of saying, like, hey, don't make me take you off the case, because obviously it's like, Needham Industries is really, like, kind of like trying to paint this narrative about her, but it's like, yeah, but Hernando's family, like, this case will like, you being on this case could jeopardize our chances of winning, and we could win. So don't make me have to take this case away from you. So she did what she could do, and because especially at this time she's going into therapy, because it's been one blow after another. It's like, right, she got shot. Her and DeCourcy lost the baby after everything they did to get to the point of getting their baby, getting in a position to have the conversation about having the baby, and then just to lose the baby like that. And then also the whole Lucy thing. It's just one thing after another she didn't want to talk about, obviously. And even she says, like, yeah, it's a steady process, so we fully can't know, like, you know, until she continues it. But she ended up talking to the reporter and ended up putting her story out there. That she wanted whatever monetary compensation she could give to the Malcolm family, she was going to. She was putting her story out there. She's like, I want to take responsibility, because she's dealing with a corporation that will not take responsibility for hurting someone. So she wants to be like, no, I'm going to take responsibility for it. It's like, were you the one behind the wheel? And it's like, no. And it's like, okay. Because the reason why this all started, how the reporter found out, is because Lulu sent the Malcolm family a letter before she died, confessing everything, wanting forgiveness. And it's like, oh, that took a lot of courage. That must have taken courage. And it was almost like this, I think it's not even a backhanded compliment, but I think the fact is the reporter used a very specific term, limited amount. It's kind of like, it's like, yeah, don't treat it like it was a very, like, courageous decision. It's like, it took, like, just the most limited amount of courage, trying to say, like, taking that little bit of a leap, you know, it's all it takes is a little courage. It didn't take a lot. And so now that the story's public, and now, you know, spinning all that she's looking into and coming forward about her story and kind of putting her narrative out there. Because I didn't read the newspaper article all the way through, so I don't know if the reporter, like, fully included all that stuff, or they probably, like, connected all of it. I mean, to be fair, like, Siobhan wasn't the driver, but she was a part of it. So I don't know if that was do correct me in the comments down below, because I saw part of like the headline of like the article, but I didn't like read it, like pause it to read it. So I don't know like how much of this whole the Malcolm family story was kind of intertwined in that to kind of show where Siobhan was coming from. And there's no using this against her now because it's kind of out there potentially. But she actually went to visit the Malcolms, and was it Taylor Malcolm? His wife. It's like, oh, don't thank me. Don't confuse my courtesy of bringing you in here as like forgiveness or whatever. And she's like, I want whatever amount of money. She's like, do you think there's any money that can compensate? Like, you think there's a literal dollar amount that can be afforded to, like, you know, my husband doing make up for the 15 years I was no longer able to dance with my husband because of you. You had all this time you could have come forward, you know, and it's like, right. Like, do you realize like how conflicted this has made me? You know, cause she's probably like a very religious woman. And it's like, I was not raised to like hold on to hate, but I've hated you for all these years. You know, how do you know how much that's kind of like tortured my soul, being stuck between like, this is not how I was raised to be, but I can't help it when someone, you know, and she has every right to be angry. And it's like, Siobhan deserved, like, you want to be protective of Siobhan because you're like, right, you understand like she was young and she was scared, but that doesn't take away like that family's pain. You apologizing all these years later doesn't, because also it's like, right, are you on your own, because the perception could be like, oh, you're only like doing that now because of your guilty conscience finally getting to you, but also just because of all this stuff circulating. So it can kind of paint Siobhan in a negative light. But I think it's just like, that's all you can do. You can, you know, because that's also the thing, like saying sorry, sometimes that is just for you to alleviate your own guilt. That's kind of what her mom was kind of getting at before too. But it's still a situation of, it was still the right thing to do. And even if it's these years later, like, it doesn't bring back, it doesn't make up for the pain you've caused. Like, all you can do is like, right, you can suffer their ire, you can suffer their hate, and you just have to live every day making up for it. Because also in the narrative is that that Siobhan, you know, told the reporter, was like, that whole thing with Taylor Malcolm like shifted something inside her. That's why she went into law. It's because of that. It shaped her into who she is now. So but she was also talking to DeCourcy about an interesting topic where she's like, my mom says that you and me, you know, our bond isn't just love. We also bond over like sorrow and loss, because he lost his mom at a young age. She was about the same age when she lost her dad. And because DeCourcy cooked jambalaya, and it's like, yeah, when mom, it used to be something they'd have all the time, and except like his dad just never like wanted it anymore after his mom died, you know. It's like for him, it's almost like he kind of lost it until he started looking through like stuff after their dad passed away from the house, you know, and saw some recipes and stuff, and that led to this whole him making it now. And so I thought that was just kind of beautiful how that kind of came back around. And them both kind of talking a little bit about that stuff, because I don't know how much they've really talked about some of that over the course of their relationship. And it is a beautiful thing. And maybe this is also a point too, that it's like, the fact is that they, you know, the correlation between Jackie and Jenny's relationship versus DeCourcy and Siobhan. Yeah, they have their bumpy roads, but it is a very beautiful, stable relationship. Jackie and Jenny can have a beautiful relationship, but it's just tumultuous just because of who Jackie is. But the point I was making, I'm curious, did they specifically like also like write Siobhan and DeCourcy that way too, just because it's like, right, you want to show a powerful black relationship. Maybe those type of relationships, and maybe this is me reading too much into it, aren't always depicted as like a, you know, seen in this beautiful, healthy manner. Once again, yes, they have their issues, but they're just shown as kind of like a strong couple, you know. And then maybe I think they maybe are very specifically written that way just to show like, you know, this because I think the stereotype against like, you know, a black relationship and a black family and what that looks like and what that can be, there are stereotypes about it. You might like, it might always get whittled down to like a statistic about what that looks like and so on and so forth. So maybe I think them specifically being written the way they are is to showcase that, you know. Because of course he also had this interesting conversation with Jackie, and it was kind of, I think it played a massive role in that conversation he had with Benny too, was because Jackie was saying like, oh, that DeCourcy's dad had the right idea, kind of dying in your. He's like, yeah, plenty of people die in a hospital too, but he's like, your dad probably had the right idea, passing away in your own comfort of your own home. And DeCourcy references Louis Armstrong. He's like, right. For him, he's like, he never understood how someone like Louis Armstrong just lived in a modest pad. It's like, it was just him and his wife. They never actually had any kids, but he says, like, maybe that is what a family is. Maybe a family, you know, what the definition of what a family is. Sometimes it can just be two people, or maybe even just that one. That you don't need necessarily kids to have that conversation about who is and what is a family. Because obviously what a family is can be different things to different people. Or, you know, for some people, it's like having a family could just be like, oh, you and your significant other, or maybe you and your significant other and kids. It's just like having that one person, you know, even just that one person that really, like, once again, kind of struck a chord with Jackie. And like I said, I think that played a massive role in things. But DeCourcy is doing everything he can to work on the Dryden case, but he's coming up short. Like anyone that he tries to reach out to, some of the victims, obviously no luck on finding Bet. What was it? Lucy has kind of gone underground. There was another one that he talked to. She wanted nothing to do with it, and so it kind of came down to Irina, because the only other one was Dominic, and obviously, sadly, she died. There was the roommate. I want to say it was like Lucy's roommate, which kind of like, yeah, she just kind of disappeared, and she saw Dominic, and it was like, oh, did you she's like, hey, do you know Dominic? And she was kind of like, she said it was just because she's never seen a dead body before. I wonder, could it be that she's actually, I was like, I don't think so. I was about to say, not unless she ends up actually being Lucy and she just changed her name and pretend like, but I'm sure like he has photos of her and stuff like that. So not unless she knows the truth about like, oh, I know where Lucy is, I'm just made a promise I wouldn't tell anyone type of thing. But seeing Dominic and knowing like, oh, like this is someone who killed himself because of Dryden. So I don't know if that's what it is, because it's like, you know, because of course it was like, oh, thanks for being helpful. And she's like, was I? She kind of felt bad and down about it. So that makes me wonder, is there more to that or not? Does she actually know where she is or something? But DeCourcy ends up meeting with Irina later, and is trying to convince her to face Dryden, because everyone wants to put it behind him, understandably. And DeCourcy's like, oh, we can protect you, because it turns out she was actually threatened by a cop, which part of me wonders, like, okay, so who was it? Is it going to be like a very specific cop, or is it like a, because she was like, yeah, I was threatened by one like back in April of like last year or something. So it's like, okay, well, I could get a cop to look after you. And she's like, oh, so you want to protect me from a Boston police officer by getting me protected by Boston police? It's like, well, he's going to go with Kaysen, which we'll get to Kaysen in a second. But when it's all said and done, it's like, right, it's like, fine, don't, if you want to make it something about, just simply treat it as revenge, which I even love Irina being like, oh, how very like Russian of you. She was like, basically, like my grandmother used to always say that like revenge is sweet. So I'm interested to find out who this cop is that kind of came to threaten her. Has to be someone on Kaysen's payroll. It has to be someone that was still on the force, because she recognized him as a Boston police. So I wonder what that's going to be about. But obviously, Chris is kind of getting brought into the fold on this, because Dan had him come in about the bomber who bombed like that. Was it Hartman who bombed the abortion clinic? And he seemed like he might be kind of a little like out there, like not all there mentally. But it turns out what really set him off is because him and his wife was pregnant. She didn't want to have a baby, especially with him. And so she ended up having an abortion. She lied and said it was a miscarriage, but she said, I'm a terrible liar. So that's what motivated this decision. It's not, he's making it seem like he's kind of like crazy and that this is all about some like, because he's kind of he tried to spin it as like, oh, Catholics were being persecuted type of thing. It's like, no, it was like a personal thing that set you off to do what you did. And obviously Blair's running this case, and they've got enough to kind of indict him and stuff for it. Because they had to look a little deeper into understanding why he did what he did. At some point in this conversation, I think it kind of hit a little home to Kaysen, because like a little bit about her relationship with her fiance or whatever made, I think, Kaysen kind of reflect a little bit more on his marriage. There's also the him and Blair thing, which I'm like, oh, is that about to be a thing? But Blair's like, no, like, my future husband, whoever he's going to be, is like, you're nice and all, but all you're ever going to be is a cop. Which he's like, yeah, that's kind of why my wife left me in the first place. But Dan is going to offer him a job to be the investigator for their office, which is like, hey, him and DeCourcy get to work a lot closer together, but also like Chris, like that strike force isn't what it was. It's like with everything that's kind of going on, it's like he would have to rebuild from the ground up. It's kind of, hey, I'm gonna cut ties now. Whoever takes over, which maybe that could be an issue later on of like, all right, well, who ends up kind of rebuilding the strike force and what that looks like. So having a personal investigator being someone that he trusts, because Case is like the only cop that, well, he has a very, once again, tumultuous relationship with Jackie, but it's like, at the very least, Case is one of the only cops he can really fully, wholeheartedly trust and thinks not only as a colleague, but a friend. So, which also, the Kaysen thing is interesting too, because we find out he ends up, what is it, like, he had syphilis from his adventures last episode. He's like, oh, I should have probably worn a condom. I was like, you think you would, considering you are mixing it up with a lady of the night. That's not you don't always get like screenings, and probably, I guess it depends on the circumstances, whether she's just kind of doing her own thing and just like kind of just has like maybe a pimp situation and not like an escort situation where it's like, I would assume there's kind of like a higher degree, thing is like probably those situations people are probably checked more often than like, someone who's just kind of like a probably like higher class lady of the night just working for a pimp type of thing in comparison to like an escort or something. I don't know. But it's like, oh, that's interesting. And so I'm wondering, is that, it's like, okay, I didn't expect that to be how that came back to kind of bite him. I was expecting something else, but there's still room for that to come back to bite him in other regards. We'll kind of have to wait and see. But I do love that Blair's trying to figure out what DeCourcy's working on, because she's saying like, hey, we're probably going to be working together for a while, so we should kind of bury the hatchet and just kind of be cool with each other. And it's like, right, you have that gun, like, or would you ever, you have it, but would you ever pull the trigger? He's like, if I was in a situation with like the Anton thing and I saw him coming and I had it on me, yeah, I would pull the trigger. She's like, honesty in men is kind of rare. And he's like, honesty in women is kind of rare too. Kind of, I think for him, it's like, I just still don't trust you, Blair. Like, you're being a little shady. You're only like asking these questions because you kind of get something, because she heard he was working on something and he was keeping it low key, even going as far as asking Chris, like, hey, what is DeCourcy working on? It's like, hey, I'm just kind of a lonely cop. That's kind of not my place to say, even though Kaysen has been brought in on what this is all about, and so he's going to be helping investigate that as well. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where everything ends up taking us going forward into the next episode with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.